Hello Gemini, welcome to your horoscope for the full moon in Leo. Now this is happening on Monday the 6th of February at 5:30 a.m. if you're in the southern hemisphere with me, so change the time according to your locale. I feel tension at this one. I'll be honest with you, Gemini, I really do. I think that the sleepy kind of sluggishness of the beginning of this year is really dissipating. Remember that Mercury, Mars, and now Uranus have all stationed direct. So as far as the planets in our solar system, all of the major ones, everyone's moving forwards. And that's going to be happening for the next 88 days. So that's progress, and that's awesome. That's also a kind of insistence on looking at some stuff that we kind of maybe kicked under the rug for the time being. Now, first and foremost, Mars in your first house is, I hope that the burns aren't 3rd degree, babe. I hope that you're doing all right. And I hope that it can be sort of like moved into like a passionate space. Maybe that's how this is showing up for you. Think of that butch energy of Mars and the positive or the helpful nature of Mars, the helpful nature of Butch. You know, that's confidence, that's direction, that's passion as well, red. So hopefully with this, over this next month and a bit, the last dance of Mars in Gemini for the next little bit of time, you'll be able to feel that moving ahead. Now, we have lots of squares at this lunation. So first up, let me just tell you where the moon itself will be. So the moon is in your 3rd house. Leo's your 3rd house, which is our village. The 3rd house is where we find our local community. It's a lot to do with our communication styles. It can be to do with our folk magic too. And what I mean by that is the communication of skills via verbal communication or storytelling rather than so much like academia. When I'm trying to describe the 3rd house, I'm trying to expand the definition a little bit. Well, I'm trying to expand them all as I learn, but hopefully this will make sense to you in that way, because it is to do with communication, definitely, but think about that too. It's sort of like the stories that we share to one another. You know, I see a campfire in the 3rd house. I see sitting around a fire and sharing. I see skills being learned by verbal communication rather than by degree. And the reason I say that is because I think opposite the 3rd house is the 9th, which is the house of philosophy and mind expansion and academia, religion as well. So back to the 3rd. And the 3rd house has actually got a lot to do with Gemini. You could really relate to this space. Think about the conversations that you have ad nauseum. Think about your chatter, Gemini. And I don't say this in a derogatory way. Remember, I have a Gemini moon, so I feel you. I feel you very deeply. But that continual conversation, that continual investigation, you know, there's an inquisitive nature to Gemini. There's also a very inquisitive nature to the 3rd house. I like this, that Leo is there for you. You know, Leo is the lion, the pride child. So you can be proud of that part of you, I think, is what I'll say, Gemini. This is a great moon for you to, actually, here we go. You can see it happen, can't you? Yeah. I love this part of you, Gemini. I love how inquisitive you are. I love the conversation. I love to talk to you about anything that's on your mind. And I love how you share the majority of what's on your mind. And so at this full moon in Leo, I think that you can set down any self-consciousness about that idea of you and embody the lion, embody Leo. Be proud of it. I think that as we progress in this culture, we know that there's so much information available. It can be really overwhelming, and it can feel, because you are, you know, incredibly greedy, not in a derogatory way. You take a lot of information in, Gemini. You're consistently learning and thinking about things and listening to this philosophy, that absorbing so much that in this day and age, when there's access all areas to anything you could possibly want to learn about, it can be like, whoa, I think that there's just not much room in my head anymore. It can be pretty overwhelming. And the best way to sort of process what it is that we're kind of taking in is by sharing it, by sort of sharing ourselves and what it is that we've come to learn about ourselves. So I get the feeling that the time is for you to let the criticism of the past wash away at this full moon. And yeah, I've been using the word pride a lot, but it's the perfect season for it, honey. It's a full moon in Leo. We've got to be proud of ourselves for who we are, for who we innately are. And, other people can find us annoying or too much or, intensity. They can feel the intensity of our being. And if that's communicated to us in a derogatory way, it can be really, really damaging and really hurtful and make us feel ashamed or worried of the inner workings of our being. You're trying to get to the bottom of it, Gemini, and that's there's no shame in that. So that was important for me to say. I think there's the full moon in the third. Mars is in your first house. Yeah, that's a nice basis for this reading. Let's also have a little look-see though, because Venus has entered Pisces, and Venus in Pisces is like so seductive. Think about the femme. So if Mars is the butch principle in ourselves, then Venus is the femme, aren't they? Venus is the one that is just enwrapped with pleasure and beauty and art and creativity and the languid sensibility of ourselves, slow moving, as opposed to Mars, which can be very fast moving. So the 10th is your most public self. How you're publicly perceived and received can have things to do with our legacy and our career as well. I like this, Gemini. I like this femme in a tryst with the butch, 10th and the 1st. That's an interesting story to tell. That's a really interesting story to tell. It can be like a tango, Venus and Mars. It can be a sort of, face-off. We can think about it in those cute sorts of ways. I will keep in mind that Venus pulls rank in this little configuration. Venus is what we call exalted in Pisces, which means that they are of incredible use. They're incredibly at home in the depths, the watery intensity, the watery limitlessness of Pisces. There's something of like a mermaid maybe about Venus in Pisces. That could be a nice thing to think about. And so this public perception of yours, this visibility of yourself, Gemini, I tend to believe that, it's not, it's just a fact. We all have Mars in our chart, we all have Venus in our chart, don't we? We all have butch, we all have femme. At the moment, the femme parts of you are saying, hey, Mars, I wasn't talking to you. Like, be quiet. Allow me, I think Venus is saying. So can you work with that? Is that something that you can, and this isn't to say, this is not a stifling of your nature at all, Gemini. Remember all that stuff we talked about at the very beginning of the reading. You're quick moving, and you do have a lot of ideas, you do have a lot to say, you do have a lot of thoughts, you do have a lot that you wish to share around the campfire. I feel that this Mars in your first house has got to be a little bit exhausting. And I like to think that the femme of Venus is, because it's your 10th, it's something that's going to be, people are probably going to recognize that maybe in you. They're going to be like, babe, you look really beautiful. Like, you look great. Something like that, you know? It's sort of like you're emanating this femme who's got a handle on the butch. I mean, I love, but this is not picking one or the other, you know? We don't do this. Does that make sense? I hope it does. I might have to listen to this one back. There's another square, so there's more pressure with Uranus and the luminaries. So the sun is in Aquarius, the moon is in Leo, the full moon in your 3rd house, Uranus in your 12th house. So let's cast our minds to all of the difficulty or the intensity that we've experienced with the eclipses last year in Taurus. Taurus has had a major focus in our lives over this last bit of time. And Taurus is your 12th house, Gemini. It's the access that you have to your past lives and your spirituality, your magic. The most magical parts of you are not in peril, but in definite high definition of focus. And so Uranus is the energy of revolution, of flipping the script and sort of shaking our consciousness awake to a fresher perspective. I think I've told the story, but the idea of Saturn being the visible outer limits of our solar system was shattered, was revolutionized when Uranus was discovered with the telescope. You can see that sort of link there, can't you? And so this continual energy in your unconscious world, in your dream space, the liminal space between sleep and awake, what's behind the High Priestess's veil? How do you really believe human consciousness is connected? You know, this is the house for it. This is the 12th. So this lunation is squaring, there's pressure. So it's almost as if I feel that with the support of your beauty, there's something that you're being urged to bring to that campfire, to that table. There's something else that you're sharing that has a really, really rich connection to the magical parts of you. Uranus is not retrograde no more. They're moving forwards. They want to get this thing rewritten. So hopefully you can feel that kind of, maybe you can, if you're feeling the friction at this full moon, hopefully that's gone a little way as to explaining why. But I think, I don't know, when I think of Gemini, I always think of the Lover's card, you know, that's the classic Gemini energy. You know, there is that beautiful, beautiful heavenly duality in this card, in the sentiment of Gemini. There's two of you, there's a conversation continuous, this side and that side. There's a choice in the Lover's card. There's a choice of which way we're going to take this. So take from this reading what you will. And I hope that the language that I've used is sort of understandable enough that you don't feel gendered by the thing. I'm committing to using butch and femme when I describe I'm not in favour of divine feminine, divine masculine. I think that there's further investigation into those terms. But butch and femme's cute. That's queer. That's what I am. So yeah, there we go. But anyway, like the pleasurable side of you, I feel really strongly. I feel it quite vividly. The way that you're being publicly perceived with Venus's, the Venusian influence in your 10th house is cooling the fire of Mars, the frustration in your first. And I can see this here with the tarot that I just pulled. I apologize if there's anxiety, you know, I apologize if it's been a difficult time, Gemini. I kind of have had my mind and thoughts and love with you for the last while. As I said, I've got a Gemini moon and it hasn't been easy, this Mars energy in Gem. It's been really, really hard, and it has brought up a whole manner of different anxieties that we've had to rest through, and that we've hopefully been able to take the time to cool our jets and to roll with the punches, roll with the disappointments, roll with the anxiety. Because the next cards that I have here, isn't that lovely? And there's the Queen of Wands. Beautiful. Beautiful. And the Ten of Pentacles. Look, the 10th house. It's a good card for the 10th house. Legacy. Culmination. Yeah. And the Queen of Wands in this particular reading, we can say, is your magical, beautiful essence. The parts that we can describe about you that are beautiful. And this is, take it how it lands, you know, it could be to do with your physicality. However you're moved by beauty is what is moving your public perception as we speak, and giving a bit of relief to that aggression in the first house. The Queen of Wands has spoken. So yeah, full moon in the third. You know the third like the back of your hand. You know what to do in the third. You know the stories to tell around the campfire of the third. Oh, that's a nice imagery too, isn't it? Full moon in Leo around the campfire in the third house. Great. Tell the stories, weave the stories, and let beauty in. Let seduction be a string in your bow. There you go, there's your reading. Get your birth chart read by me, if you please. Gemini, if you haven't already, you can head to umaruby.com and book yourself a space with me. Tip money is always welcome at buymeacoffee.com/umaruby. I really appreciate the tips. So sweet of everyone to support my work in the ways that they can. That's it from me. I will be... Oh, no, that's not... I'll tell you next week. But I will see you in 2 weeks at the Pisces new moon. I'm looking forward to that one. Take care, Gemini. I love you always. Bye.